Hello, and thanks for joining us for this Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and coming up in this episode, the government presses ahead with plans to ban trail hunting in England and Wales.
This is about people who are determined to keep hunting foxes, hares, deer, and will not comply with the law, exploiting every loophole, creating smokescreens. That's why we need the law to be tightened up.
There will be a way forward. We will find a way forward. And the sadness is that has to be in opposition to a government which seems absolutely determined to allow or to enable a continuing culture war in the countryside.
Exasperation from the Countryside Alliance and celebration from the League Against Cruel Sports later in today's programme. First, though, this week we have been taking a whistle-stop tour through the history of farming. It has been so interesting. And now we're up to the Second World War. When it broke out, it quickly became clear that the British government needed to completely transform farming practices in order to protect the country's food supply. Now, that was a big shock to the system for many, like my grandfather, who had to plough up the fields. He kept his precious beef cattle on his pride and joy, according to my mum. As Mary Ward-Lowry reports, the wartime Minister for Labour, Ernest Bevin, was tasked with persuading farmers to cooperate with some pretty draconian measures.
Everyone in the country is now part of the fighting services. Whether you're fighting in the air, on the land, or in the middle of the Atlantic, protecting convoys, transporting cargoes, or producing food at home.
The outbreak of the Second World War put the rather neglected topic of British farming practices right back at the centre of the national conversation about food supply. That's according to Ollie Douglas, curator at the Museum of English Rural Life at the University of Reading.
Going into the war, the UK is reliant on a really significant volume of food imports. So we're talking about something like 70% of national consumption is imported food. Coming out of the war, we're much closer to where we are today, which is around that sort of 40 to 45% of our food is imported. The blockades in the North Atlantic during the war really emphasised the need for us to be producing more food.
The food supply at home can be increased. That has exactly the same effect as if you increase your output in shipping and arms. 10,000 tonnes more food produced at home means one ship less having to cross the Atlantic. As the wheat passes through the threshing machine, it has exactly the same effect on the war effort as the bullets coming out of the machine gun.
The way in which the government goes about that, really carefully control what people can do on their land, how they do it, the sort of compulsory powers over land use imposed through the Ministry of Agriculture, a really interventive structure, county agricultural executive committees that are really authoritarian and they dictate what people can do on their land. In parallel with that, you've also got a massive uplift in subsidy.
Whatever may have been the attitude of the country to agriculture in the past, we cannot forget our dependence upon you now. We won't.
This is all administered through the County War Agricultural Executive Committees, which became known as the War Ags. And the War Ags have this incredible power at the county level. They're acting with this broad remit, which is essentially to bring as much grassland or marginal land into arable cultivation as possible, to focus on those bulk yield crops, on wheat and on potatoes, and raise production of them as significantly as they can.
Farmer Yelland of Hatherley Moor in Devon was an enthusiastic advocate for ploughing up uncultivated land in aid of the war effort.
When I first suggested that the moor should be ploughed up, I hardly dared to show my face in Hatherley without a bodyguard. Still, the moor has been ploughed, and all of us around here are proud to see the job's been done. To the best of our belief, it's never been ploughed before in history.
And what this means is a really heavy emphasis on bringing land that perhaps hasn't ever really been cultivated in that way before into agricultural production, which has, massive environmental consequences and implications, which aren't necessarily considered in a major way at the time. But you also have this emphasis on making farmers do things.
This time, of course, we use modern appliances, Caterpillar tractors and deep digging ploughs.
The overriding narrative of Second World War agriculture centres on the story of tractorisation. Pre-war, there being much heavier reliance on draft animal power in agriculture, and post-war, pretty much all farmers are tractor users by that stage. It's a really complex shift, though. So that economic story and the sort of productivity during the war narrative pushes this idea that farmers are forward-thinking progressives, happily getting rid of their heavy horses in favour of tractors. Often people actually kept those two things running in parallel.
By the tremendous effort you make now, you will not only help to save the nation, but you will put it under an obligation never again to allow any of these basic industries on which the life and defense of the nation depends to go into decay. Now is the chance, then, to save the nation and win your own future.
In Lincolnshire, around 30,000 acres of farmland was commandeered to build airfields during World War II, like this one in Sturgate. And 82 years later, parts of that same runway are still here. Other aspects of that transformation in British farming are still with us too. In fact, they've had far-reaching and unforeseen consequences.
The other main thing coming out the other side of the war is the type of farming. So massive uplift in mechanisation, in sort of green revolution interventions, in terms of petrochemical interventions, and all of those shifts overwrite other potential futures in terms of how farming might develop over the later course of the 20th century. And we're trying to unpick loads of those things now. So, these aren't tensions that have gone away. They're tensions that have shaped that 20th century story of agriculture.
And that report was compiled by Mary Ward-Lowry. Now, the government has opened a consultation on its proposals to ban trail hunting in England and Wales. There's already a ban in Scotland. The Westminster Government committed to stopping the practice in its animal welfare strategy, which was published in December. In trail hunting, hounds follow a pre-laid animal-based scent. It replaced traditional fox hunting after that was banned in England and Wales in 2004. And, as we've reported many times since, it is controversial. Anti-hunt campaigners argue that it's a smokescreen for the continued illegal hunting of foxes. Instead, they want clean boot hunting, where bloodhounds follow the scent of humans, or drag hunting using a non-animal scent. Country sports enthusiasts, though, say trail hunting takes place within the law, and those who do break the law are prosecuted under existing legislation. The Countryside Alliance actively campaigns for hunting, and Tim Bonner is its chief executive. He's unhappy that the government is pressing ahead with this ban.
It's not a surprise, but just because it's not a surprise doesn't mean it isn't a bizarre priority. I mean, I frankly find it extraordinary. And even if you look simply at the animal welfare strategy, what about all the other issues in there? This apparently is the most important thing. And we know there was a manifesto commitment. That in itself is, I think, deeply questionable. And interestingly, I mean, the consultation itself, there seems to be no real attempt to justify this legislation. It's talking about primary legislation. We're going to have to go through the whole process in Parliament. We're going to have to battle over that. It was 700 hours the last time a Labour government legislated on hunting. And I just find it very, very strange indeed. But a government which says that it's focused on a cost of living crisis, on delivering growth, and yet here we are having an argument over one of the most irrelevant issues that's possible to consider.
Well, many would consider that it's not irrelevant. Obviously, it's not war in the Middle East, but it's not irrelevant. I mean, the National Police Chiefs Council have said that trail hunting provides a smokescreen.
The fact is, and this is coming from the government's own figures, from the Minister of Justice, that more people are convicted on the Hunting Act than any other piece of wildlife legislation. This is, what is the problem that the government is seeking to address? If you chase a wild mammal with your dogs, you are committing an offence, and there is ample evidence, as I say, from the government's own statistics, that you will be convicted of that offence. So what are we doing here?
They're not going to ban drag hunting, though, are they? Why can't hunts just move to that?
The government has a huge majority. It will pass the legislation it wants to, and hunts will have to adhere to whatever legislation is passed and try to find a way to continue to work within the law. That may be challenging for some of them. I hope that that's a transition that most hunts will be able to make, but there's no guarantee to that. And given the importance that hunts have in rural communities, the social hub, the employment, the services they provide to farmers, the farming community, putting all that at risk on the basis of some undefined problem, and therefore further legislation on hunting. It's something that we just can't support at all.
It does look like it's the end of the road, though, doesn't it? Do you think?
I don't think it's the end of the road for hunting, because hunting is extraordinarily resilient. Hunting people are determined to keep their community, to keep their hounds, to keep their staff, to keep everything that makes hunting such an important hub for rural communities. So there will be a way forward. We will find a way forward. And the sadness is that has to be in opposition to a government which seems absolutely determined to allow or to enable a continuing culture war in the countryside.
Tim Bonner from the Countryside Alliance. The League Against Cruel Sports is a vociferous campaigner against hunting. Emma Slavinsky is their CEO. She welcomes the consultation on banning trail hunting in England and Wales.
We're delighted. We've been asking the government for a long time to get on with this, so it's great that they have. And we're really pleased to see that, as well as talking about the ban on trail hunting, it also is talking about the wider Hunting Act and ways in which that needs to be tightened up to make sure that we are getting rid of the hunting of foxes and deer and hares for good. We don't want to be back here again in 20 years' time, arguing again about the details. So we want a law that's enforceable, and we think this consultation is the first step towards that.
You know, the Countryside Alliance argues that the existing Hunting Act, which took years and many hours of parliamentary time to thrash out, is adequate and it is able to prosecute law breaking when there is evidence. Haven't they got a point?
No, they don't, I'm afraid. And, you don't have to take my word for that. You've seen the government's position. Chief Superintendent Matt Longman, who leads for the National Police Chiefs Council on this issue, he says the Hunting Act doesn't work. Illegal hunting is prolific and trail hunting is being used as a smokescreen. And just already this season, so from about August last year to now, and the season's not over yet, we've had nearly 600 instances of illegal hunting, and that's just where the hunts are being monitored. We've got animals being hunted for fun across the country, week in and week out, and we just need to nail it and get it right. And I should be clear that no one's trying to stop genuinely simulated hunting, like clean boot hunting with bloodhounds. No one's trying to stop that happening. This is about people who are determined to keep hunting foxes, hares, deer, and will not comply with the law, exploiting every loophole, creating smoke screens. That's why we need the law to be tightened up.
I mean, you talk about reports of illegal hunting. How do you know that's not just hearsay? Where is the hard evidence?
Well, the hard evidence is there to be seen, video footage, photography. We have people call us on our crime watch line, people who have no involvement in this issue at all. These are genuine eyewitness accounts. And we know it's happening up and down the country. We know that a lot of it we're not seeing, but even what we are seeing is showing us that this is absolutely prolific, and that's why we need to take action.
Emma Slavinsky from the League Against Cruel Sports. And the government consultation on banning trail hunting in England and Wales closes on June the 18th. And that's all we've got time for this morning. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Sarah Swadling, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.